Dragonball Z, a manga turned TV show many grew up with in the early to mid-90s. Starting in 1989 and continuing until 1996, it has left a long-standing impact on pop culture to this day, and nowhere has this impact been felt more than the show's massive library of tie-in and spin-off games, most retelling the plot of the show. Today we will talk about a part of a sequel to one such game, Dragonball Xenoverse 2. Releasing in September of 2017, the Switch port of Xenoverse 2 aims to give fans a handheld version of the well-received title. The game originally released in late 2016 for the Xbox One, PS4, and Microsoft Windows, before making the jump to the Switch in 2017. The port seems all the more impressive when you consider the technical differences in these platforms. In this video I'll only be covering the base game, and not counting any of the DLC, as I feel the majority of criticisms for the base game will also apply to the several expansion packs. But without further delay, let's get into it. The story starts out with our unnamed protagonist doing one of several introductions that involve spying on a conversation between a main or a side character from the show. If you're an Namekian, you'll spy on Guru and Nail, if you're a Saiyan, you'll spy on Bulma and Vegeta, and so on. The protagonist gets interrupted during their spying and is informed that they were accepted as a time patroller by Elder Kai, who requests your presence at the Time Nest. You are then sent on one of several missions which have you getting involved with the story of Dragon Ball Z, the first being Raditz' arrival on Earth. There are a lot of these smaller missions, so I won't be covering all of them. However, I will be covering major plot beats of the story. At some point, whilst going through the Saiyan saga, you're introduced to the secondary antagonist, Turles, with Lord Slug following suit in the Frieza saga. These characters are dealt with quickly during the Frieza saga, but are replaced by our main antagonists, Towa and Mira, who are joined by a masked Saiyan in the Android saga and onwards. After a quick fight with Cooler, after Goku turns Super Saiyan, you moved swiftly onwards to the Android saga. Most of the story then plays out as the show did, with minor changes to the events of the story, such as characters being stronger than they initially were or absent from battles that they were initially involved in. During the Android saga, you get to fight alongside future Gohan, briefly trying to fend off Androids 17 and 18, and the timeline here changes when Android 16 is suddenly present in this timeline. I do mention this because after the main story you have to make a decision that could affect the flow of time. As the protagonist, you have to choose whether or not Trunks can save Gohan. For fans of the show, this is a really difficult call to make, but it is mostly ineffectual. Oddly enough though, the Buu saga is used as mostly filler for the plot of the game. However, due to confrontation with the Masked Saiyan, it leads us to diverge from the plot of the TV show into the two canonical movies, Battle of Gods and Resurrection F. During the Battle of Gods missions, you have to fight to keep the Masked Saiyan from interfering with Beerus and Goku's battle. During this fight, the protagonist breaks the mask off, revealing that it was in fact Bardock, Goku's father. Mira shows up and a battle ensues. Jumping ahead to the Resurrection F mission, the protagonist must help Vegeta finally kill Frieza and Cooler for good. After this, the protagonist becomes trained by Beerus and Whis in order to prepare for a final confrontation with Towa and Mira. The initial fight happens in Toki Toki City, the hub from the first game, with the final fight happening in an unknown timeline after Mira absorbs Towa. The protagonist and Goku then put an end to Mira with a combined attack. Goku summons a feast using the Dragon Balls after returning to the hub world, and then the credits roll following a final, animated cutscene. The game is broken into two mission types, story missions and parallel quests. The story missions see you going through the events of the game in a fairly concise way, fixing timelines and following the predetermined narrative. Parallel quests, however, are alternate missions that don't follow any sort of concise narrative, and this is likely how you're going to spend most of your time during the game. The parallel quests are broken into two types of missions. They either have battles or Dragon Ball quests. The battles play like every other battle, having the player defeat computer opponents to win. Dragon Ball quests, however, play slightly differently, as you must look around the map to find 3 or more Dragon Balls and return them to the time machine in order to win. This does lead me to my first major criticism though. The game can become very repetitive and very grind heavy, which a lot of players might become frustrated with. To help alleviate the tedium of grinding, Dimps added Tosok in an update. He's a character who will boost your level for a price. I personally didn't use this shortcut during my playthrough of the story, however, I can understand why some players might use the boost system. Each quest does contain an ultimate finish. a game mechanic in which you meet some predetermined criteria that vary but usually involve defeating all characters within a certain time limit or a specific order. Meeting this criteria will earn you more EXP and potentially more items. Meanwhile, in the Dragon Ball quests, you must defeat all opponents before returning the Dragon Ball. The game uses a simple enough combat system which I found entertaining to use even despite that simplicity. As I played the Switch version for this review, the controls I'll be covering are from the Switch. The Y button is the standard light attack and will perform basic combos depending on how many times you press it. The X button is the heavy attack. Using this in conjunction with the light attack will lead to more complicated combos that deal more damage. The A button will shoot a light ki blast, holding it will do a more powerful variant. B will make you fly up, or dash forward, depending on the position of the analog stick and duration of the press. The R button will bring up a list of super attacks that will use large amounts of ki, but will deal large amounts of damage. These are categorized into strike, blast, or stat boost supers. The L button is used in sync with the R button to load up a list of ultimate attacks. Using the most amount of ki, these moves do a lot of damage. This screen also contains the Awoken skills. These are transformations like Super Saiyan or Kaioken. Every species has a unique transformation. You can also find an evasive maneuver here, which will pull you away from a tight situation. Using L on its own will perform a faster dash. And finally, ZR and ZL will block and lock on, respectively. The Switch version of the game also has exclusive motion controls for supers. However, as I played on my Switch Lite, I was unable to use these controls due to the lack of detachable Joy-Cons. The Switch announcement trailer, however, does show an example of how these controls work, so I'll put that on screen right now. Speaking from a gameplay standpoint, it is quite repetitive, but it does keep a good balance between risk and reward. The harder the mission, the more you get from completing it. However, rewards cater very much to fans of Dragon Ball, and this will affect how long it keeps your interest if you're not already a fan. When you're a fan of the show, though, this system is exemplified, because the rewards and missions feel very much in keeping with the show as a whole, and the items all have something to give fans of the series. Items from GT, Super, and Z all make appearances to keep you invested in the game, because you want to deck out your avatar in gear from the Dragon Ball universe. As someone who played this game on multiple consoles over an extensive amount of time, I feel I can accurately sum up the quality of the port. I'll be comparing it to the PS4 Pro version of the game, as this is the version I am most familiar with. The controls were put onto Switch with a remarkably similar feeling to that of the PS4 version. The choice of button mapping made it easy for me to pick up and play because I was already familiar with the control scheme from the PlayStation 4 version of the game. I think the in-hand feel of the Switch Lite helps to further make this port enjoyable. The Switch itself is so light it feels really similar to a controller. However, to get the game onto the Switch, the devs had to make a kind of big sacrifice, and that's the graphics. The game had a significant downgrade in quality compared to the PlayStation 4 version, but this was all to keep performance mostly excellent. The frame rate tends to drop when playing the multi-lobby, but that has to do with internet connection as well as the hardware. During gameplay on the PS4, the game keeps a consistent frame rate of about 60 frames a second, with virtually no drops, whereas the Switch version generally runs at 30, though with the aforementioned drops every now and then. However, this is so infrequent during gameplay that I personally had no issues with it. I personally believe that the port has benefited the game in a way I never expected it to. It feels much better in general to experience it as a handheld, even despite the issues I did mention. The pick-up-and-play nature of the Switch fits the RPG format so much more than I feel the console version did. It just feels good to sit down and relax and sink hours into the game, especially considering you can just take it with you when you need to go somewhere else. In conclusion, I feel that the game was treated with the respect it needed when it was ported to the Switch. The excellent game feel was kept, and it's an amazing experience to have on the go. If I needed an arbitrary system for rating the game, it would probably get a 7 out of 10, because the gratuitous amounts of grinding and the general lack of appeal for people who aren't already fans of the series does affect it. As a port, though, I feel it was well handled and would get about a 9 out of 10 on a rating scale for the port, as the game performs well, but the frame rate drops keep it from being what I'd consider a perfect port. The game is kept intact, and I would hold it to be the same great experience you'd get on more powerful consoles. Regardless, thank you for watching. If you liked it, please hit that like button and hit the bell to be notified when I next upload. For now, though, enjoy the music of Steve Aoki from Xenoverse to a series of images I took using the photo mode. Something I neglected to mention because it wasn't part of the original game. Alright, I am done talking now. Sorry this has went on for so long. Alright, thanks. Bye.